Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Preview. I am Jeff Hartman, editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. That's your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers needs. And here on the preview, we talk about everything under the sun. The after party gets even crazier, so maybe want to stick around for that if you're watching live on YouTube. And if you didn't know we have a YouTube channel, go to youtube.com, search BTSC Steelers Radio. But I'm not the only one on the show. We've got the trio. Bad boy trio. We'll say it that way. So we'll start off with Bad himself, Bryan Anthony Davis. What's going on, Brian?
Hello, Jefferson, Davidson. It's nice to see both of you. I'm just feeling good. It's week 4. We've got a Good Friday coming up. So, here we go. And for anybody that wants to know, it's 14-10. The Steelers are down to the Patriots, but AFC Championship game, the greatest of all time for Madden, so I'll keep you posted.
That's right. So last week, the Steelers beat the crap out of the Bengals, as expected, and so now they're going up against the Patriots. They're trailing right now, so we'll get you live updates on that fake game as we go throughout the show. Deputy Dave, welcome to the show. What's going on?
It was a very interesting day in our neck of the woods. Between it was like the sun would be out, it would be beautiful, and then it would pour, and then the sun would come back out to be beautiful, and then it would just pouring rain again. It was one of those, I didn't really understand what's going on. It kind of was very, I don't know, equal to what life is about right now. So
yeah, I saw someone wearing a shirt today that said 2020, and then underneath it just said nope. And today was one of those weird days where it's like the sun's out and you feel great, and then clouds come in, you feel you got to go in and put a jacket on because it was colder. Anyways, we're here to take your mind off all the madness that is going on right now around our globe. COVID-19, coronavirus, the Rona, my Corona, however you want to put it. This is your time for the next hour and a half, we'll say, if you include the after party, to just decompress. Let's talk about some Steelers football, and let's listen to some updates on Brian with the fake game. Brian, do you have any quick update before we get started?
No, the Patriots are driving. Just completed a big pass inside the 30. Polamalu with the stop. Irving Fryer caught a 15-yard pass from Tomas Brady.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, we'll keep you updated. Let's talk about the headline of this episode, because we're gonna be previewing the defensive line today. And since we're gonna be previewing the defensive line, Dave brought up a good point, and I think it was Dave in our production meeting this morning, and it was basically, is the nose tackle still needed? That's the question I always ask. Javon Hargrave leaves in free agency, goes to Philadelphia, gets paid. Hey, good for him. All right. But everyone's always wondering, and people are writing like the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, the Athletic, could they find Hargrave's replacement in the draft? And my question has always been, do they have to? Do they really need to have a nose tackle? Because let's be honest, they don't play their base 3-4 defense very much anymore. And because of that, I ask myself constantly, well, why would they need to go out? I'm not saying Daniel McCullers is the answer. I know he's making the team. We know that, but I know he's not the answer. But I guess I'm just thinking, could Tyson Alualu or Chris Wormley, who is just an addition via trade? Dave, what are your thoughts on the defensive front, and is the nose tackle still a necessity?
Well, is it a necessity? When it's kind of like a punter. He's not on the field very often, but when you need one, you need to have one. So although it's not, and you know what, I actually saw someone else that I ripped it off from someone, and I can't even remember who it was. I think it might have even been a commenter on Behind the Steel Curtain or one of the YouTube things. But it's so true, is that when you need it, you better have one. I don't think Daniel McCullers is a player that they want to have as a starter nose tackle, or the only person who could be that other defensive lineman in that position, simply because I think teams would then try to get the Steelers into their base defense just to take advantage of him in other situations, because I think he's very limited with what he can do. So I would really like to see them just kind of use all three of their defensive linemen where you never really even know which one could be the guy lining up on the inside. Because there was an awful lot of times last year that Cam Hayward was lining up, either over top the guard or in the gap or even over the center whenever there was only a couple defensive linemen. So he's even someone who I wouldn't call him your starting nose tackle, but you could have those guys that could go down in there and maybe try to work a, try to find a better matchup. Try to exploit a matchup at some point.
What about you, Brian? What do you think? It sounds like you're rustling papers or something. What's going on with your microphone? My gosh. Is your mic plugged in? It sounds like your microphone on your...
my mic got disconnected somehow.
Oh, boy. Well,
so I'm going to fix that.
Yeah, I'm going to take you off for a sec, and then you come back on when you're ready. I want to bring up a comment. And that's very typical. For anyone that's first time listener, that's okay. Robert Ellison, and I'll put it on the screen, says we need another Casey Hampton. And again, do we really need another Casey Hampton? Casey Hampton played in the Dick LeBeau era where the 3-4 was their defense, period. And I just don't see I'm thinking, I just don't see the need for it, Dave. You talked your way around it and talked in circles and stuff like you always do, but still, Brian's back. Brian, are you with us?
Yeah, you know what I've realized? I didn't even have it plugged in the entire time.
Because I was like, what is going on here?
I was like, man, it sounds like he's ruffling papers right near his microphone. He's not the best color man in the league for nothing, folks. Sorry, Brian. I'm sure did you hear me talking about Casey Hampton and that stuff? Yeah. Okay, so what are your thoughts? I don't feel like they need it.
You know what? There's been a new evolution in a few positions, and one of them being backup quarterback, where it's not the same as it used to be. Another one of the running back is not the same. The nose tackle is really not the same anymore because they're really not running a true 3-4. They could call themselves a 3-4, but that's not really what they are. That's like the three of us calling us a boy band. We could call it anything we want, but how often are they really in a true 3-4? And a lot of the things that Dave said to me ring true. I really don't think they need a true nose tackle. You need a hybrid guy. And one of the hybrid guys that they had was Javon Hargrave. And one of the other ones they have is Tyson Alualu. They are getting these defensive tackles / defensive ends where they can move around. So pretty soon you might see a slow metamorphosis into a 4-3 or just whatever you need, whatever fits the bill for the time and the place.
Yeah, basically nickel has become the base defense.
Yeah.
It really has. If you want the numbers behind that, I counted up the number of snaps and where the Steelers had 3 defensive linemen on the field.
Yes. What are those?
I got it and Brian might look this up as well. I went through and looked at all the different formations and counted them up myself.
Brian did not do that.
Brian did not do that. I couldn't find it anywhere else unless Brian.
Thanks for the confidence, Dave, but no.
Yeah. No. I meant you might have been able to find it easier than I could. I couldn't find it any other easy way. First thing I did was I estimated it based on, I took all the defensive linemen, added up their snaps, divided by the number of plays, and I got it to be right around 300. Well, the answer is actually 311 snaps of over almost 1,100 snaps, 1,084 is what I had, that they had 3 defensive linemen on the field. Now, but you also have to remember there was another 13 snaps in which they had 4 defensive linemen on the field, which they sometimes do in goal line. But then the other thing that skews the number is they had 54 snaps where they only had 1 defensive lineman on the field last year. So where they really went in that, really pass heavy.
Cam, wasn't it? That would stay on.
It was Cam. Sometimes there was times it was Hargrave.
Okay.
There was a couple times it was Alualu, but the majority it was Cam who would stay on. But yeah, so 311. Let's say you even look at when they have 4 and you do the 324. That comes in just under 30% of their snaps, where they have more than 2 defensive linemen on the field. So I kind of like what you guys were both saying do you need someone I don't think they need someone who is only a nose tackle. Right now, the only person they have on the team that is only a nose tackle is Daniel McCullers. And I don't even think they need that. I like the whole notion of, like we said, it's hybrid defenses now, those hybrid defensive linemen who can play inside. And believe it or not, I would say Stephon Tuitt would be the least likely out of anyone that they have to slide down in and play nose, even though he's a mammoth of a dude. That's just doesn't seem to be his forte. But I could see anybody else sliding down and just picking up those responsibilities as they go.
And that's why I don't ever think that they should draft a nose tackle again, because like you said, 30%, you're basically, unless it's a late round draft pick, a guy that you're not heaping a ton of expectations upon. I just don't understand why it would be a necessity. And people they always long for the golden days, whether it's the older fan that longs for the 70s and the physicality and the no free agency and no salary cap and all that stuff. Or it's the people that say, I wish we had the Dick LeBeau scheme. Well, I don't know if the Dick LeBeau scheme would work so much today, because you can't have those enforcers that you had, like you had back in the early 2000s with Brian Clark. This is something that Lance and I talked about on the other day, was those hits by Ryan Clark are basically illegal now,
Yeah.
So it's a constant evolution, or metamorphosis, as Brian would say. And we'll see. So the nose tackle, is it becoming extinct? Maybe for the Steelers it is. I think Daniel McCullers makes this team, though, because I think that they still want him on the goal line, because if you're going to put Alualu or Wormley in there on occasion, you still want the big guy. They've got to come in on goal line and, short yardage situations. They gave him that contract. I mean, I don't think he's going anywhere, personally. Brian, do you disagree, Brian?
No, he's not going anywhere. Of course, he and Danny Smith Jr. have to. One of them has to make sure that the naked pictures don't get out and don't get lost. I mean, I could see those guys accidentally putting them in their lunch bag, in their McDonald's bag, and throwing them away and going, "Oh, what do we do?" But he's not going anywhere. He is a true NFL survivor. And it's absolutely amazing. And I saw a quote the other day from somebody that said, like, look, if you're good enough to play in this league for 5 years, or if you stick with the team for 5 years, and I believe it was somebody on the Steelers, and I can't remember who it was, but it's an amazing feat. And so, hats off to him. We can make jokes to Daniel McCullers, but he has convinced somebody that he's needed there.
Dave, thoughts?
I could see this being the year that he's not back, not because they don't, they keep him around. Basically, they're just waiting for somebody else to knock him out. That's actually, where they can't get rid of them. You know what I'm saying? If you have enough guys that all kind of ball out and are healthy through the preseason, that they don't feel like they could put on the practice squad and they're going to lose them, that might be when it's finally the end of the line for McCullers. Could that be this year? Sure. But I thought it also could have been last year too, or even more likely the year before. But you have, once we get into talking about this, are we turning into our depth chart and everything now? Because there's other options on the defensive line that I think could bump him off the team this year. And that's even without them drafting anyone. Isaiah Buggs, he was on the 53-man roster. You have two guys that you brought in from the XFL that are kind of not sure where the Steelers are going to go with them, because they're kind of undersized defensive linemen or oversized outside linebackers. And you're not sure which way the Steelers could go with either one of them. But you also had a player that looked really good last year in the preseason that they kept on the practice squad all last season in Henry Mondeau, who I was a big fan of him last preseason. So I wouldn't, if he can play, I'd love to see him be able to take out that McCullers spot.
Oh, Dave disappeared, or Brian disappeared. So I guess he's not going to show up. There he is. Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Number 72, Henry Mondeau. I was actually going for the mute so I could look up something for my trivia question, which is a new blockbuster. I will tell you that. And because you could hear my keys ticking, tick, 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 tick. Yep. But I didn't want to be that guy. And now I'm that guy trying to explain it. So there's other guys there. I like what Bugs brings in. We don't know what we have in Wormley. Wormley was a 3rd-round pick that was highly coveted when he came in. He actually, the Steelers must have had a choice to make between Wormley and Senquez Golson and Sammy Coates, because they all got drafted right around the same time. But so it looks like they made the right choices there. As I digress, but here's the thing. I like your idea with Mondu. I forgot all about him. I realize he's on the practice squad, but they could bring somebody in that LT Walton type position where it's like, you're here, you're back on the practice squad. We cut you. We're going to bring you back. I mean, remember the playbook. Seattle does not have 2 losses. Steeler fans, I was actually paying attention, but I love it. I love the callback. That's awesome. That's going back to like week 5. God bless you. So you know what? It's just one of those things that they have some options there. They had to make a business decision with do they keep Javon Hargrave for 5 years, or do they gamble 1 year with the window? Would we keep on calling that all-in window with Bud Dupree? And that's the way they went. And you got to respect it. So at the beginning of the show, when Jeff, you said, congratulations, you got the money. Yeah, God bless you. You earned the money, you got it, and now it's time to fill that hole. But I think this is a hole that's a lot easier to fill than edge rusher at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just a quick sidebar. I didn't realize this. I saw the report that the Steelers actually were involved in negotiations with Javon Hargrave before he signed with the Eagles, that they actually did attempt to keep him. And he said, obviously, they couldn't afford to pay him as much as Philadelphia did. But I was interested because sometimes the Steelers will just say, "Hey, go shop around," and then here's our best we can do. Here's our best offer. Go. And maybe they did that, but I guess I was just surprised to see that they were still interested. They obviously are interested, but their finances being the way they were, I don't blame Hargrave for leaving. But looking on the defensive line as a whole. I mean, I understand that most would say that the nose tackle, if we're still considering the base defense to be 3-4, even though, as Dave said earlier in the show, that's only 30% of their snaps roughly. I mean, that defensive front is a strength when everyone's healthy, right? I mean, I would say that, man, maybe second only to the secondary on the defense in terms of strength.
That. I mean,
that secondary is pretty legit.
Yeah, that secondary is pretty legit. But like I brought this up, some people love Pro Football Focus, some people don't. I say I trust more Pro Football Focus's rankings on players that are drawing contact on the line of scrimmage, like offensive line, defensive line, edge rushers, things like that. When it gets to secondary, and you don't know the coverage, it's harder to grade. But when you're grading those upfront guys, the Steelers had 4 guys in the top 11 in the NFL. I've said that so many times. I mean, because Tuitt had just enough snaps to count. It was, Hayward 2, Tuitt 5, Hargrave 8, Alu 11. People don't understand this great season he had last year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic. So it's kind of difficult. And now could it just be also the Steelers system? Absolutely. Who's to? And I mean, Wormley, he was ranked in the 60s. Who's to say he doesn't come in and make a big jump just because the Steelers system is going to be more conducive to a higher grade than Baltimore's? Because he even who's the big defensive lineman that's so good for the Ravens last year?
Brandon Williams.
Yes, he even ranked 2 spots higher than him. Wormley did. So Williams isn't, is that based on their system? So I think it's a real big strength, and it's often one that's overlooked, and it just allows everyone else in the defense to have an easier job when your big guys up front are just doing their job and taking on blockers and doing what they need to do.
Brian, what do you think about it in terms of the defensive front being the ultimate strength, or is it maybe the secondary?
I still think right now that you're going to laugh at me. I think the linebacking unit is still the strength of this team right now, which means we make that joke. The best position player in the Pirates. You know what I mean? That's but no. In this situation, it's opposite because look at these guys. You have 3 you have 3 units that I think are really grade A. I think all the way around they're pretty good. I don't want to really say the secondary because I still think behind Minka, the safety position is a little suspect.
Well, but I prefaced the defensive front with if everyone's healthy, including Stewart. So we would say that everyone's
then the
healthy in
defensive front is probably still your strongest unit.
This is a great debate to have, people. I hope you realize that. No one's picking favorites. It's a great debate when you're saying, well, Pro Football Focus has 4 their defensive front, and their secondary is really, really good, too.
Yeah.
I hope people understand. This is a really good problem to have.
It definitely is. And something that's interesting, though, because it's something we talked about on Stat Geek, part of the reason I think the defensive line is good because I feel that there's more depth at that position on the defense than anywhere else. Because we were talking about the draft and everything with offense versus defense. And I'm like, I feel right now going into the season, the defense is the stronger unit, but I think it's lacking depth much more than the offense. Because someone said, well, why our defense is solid? Why would you use a high draft pick on the defense? And when I gave this explanation, they're like, that makes a lot of sense because your defense isn't very deep. Your offense, you could maybe be upgrading some things, but it actually has more depth in places than what the defense does. Because like we said, who's the backup safety? Who's the backup inside linebacker? It's unknown. It's unknown players. Like I still have very high hopes for UG3. I'm just going to say that so I don't say the wrong name like Jeff does. But he's very unproven actually on defense. So
absolutely.
That's the question we have to. Those are the questions we have to have. So I feel that the biggest reason there's so much strength on the defensive line. I mean, look, last year they lost who was arguably their best player at the time when he was hurt in Stephon Tuitt, and then Cam Hayward steps up and just has a beast of a season the rest of the way. Javon Hargrave's going in, playing more defensive tackle. Alu is just being an absolute stud whenever he's getting his opportunity, and I mean. Isaiah Buggs was a solid rookie that just kind of got overlooked just because the other guys were so good. So depth is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Now, here's a question for both of you. We'll start with Brian. Michael O'Malley asks, do you think that Wormley is able to give any type of insight into the Ravens scheme at all? Since it's very rare that these two teams do business together, only the second time since 1998. Brian, what are your thoughts on that? Wormley bringing in some inside info, you think, or does it not even matter? It's a new year.
You know what? It might not matter, but here's the thing. There's always tendencies that you could talk about. And of course, they're going to change things around. They're not going to change things around just because Wormley is in Pittsburgh, but it is a new year. But think about it. He could coach, if he's an aware guy, he could coach on, the tendencies of the offensive line, like tells. He could talk about this guy having a tell, or the snap count with Lamar Jackson. Maybe he has a tell where he emphasizes right before the number that he's going to snap it on. There's a lot of things like when you see him shifting this way, he might be doing that. And how many times have you gone somewhere to another job or had somebody come in from another organization to your job and say, hey, it's funny, the way we did it over at Wendy's is a little different than we do it here at Burger King, but we did this at the end of the night and just saying what we did. So this could be one of those situations, hey, this is what we did.
Well, you, Dave.
Well, I was getting ready to say something, and Wes, of course, throws it in the live chat right before I got a chance to say it out loud. What's going to matter so much more than anything Wormley can tell them is no Marshall Yanda. I don't know that people talk about the great, running offense and you got to have an answer for the Ravens in the North and blah, blah, blah. I don't know that people are going to realize how much of a loss that is, because it's just people don't think about when you lose one of the best offensive linemen in the league. That's not flashy. So that I would think is more important than anything Wormley can tell. But of course he's going to be able to tell something. I mean, Jeff, you're a teacher. How many times have you ever had a different teacher tell you before you had a student in the class, well, this is what you're going to need to do to handle this kid? You know,
Hey, heads up.
It's how it works. It's how it works.
Yeah, no, I know.
So,
yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
He's gone against some of these guys in practice on that offense, and he knows what they do, and he'll be able to tell a little something, but there'll also be some stuff different. He's not going to be able to tell anything about the best lineman for the Ravens because he's not there anymore.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Now, I do want to bring up one more thing. Dave, it was an article I think you wrote today, which was a question about sack totals. Was that today that you ran that, or was that yesterday?
They all blend together. That might have been yesterday. I don't know.
So since we're talking about the defensive line, what was their sack total this past year? They ended up with 53.
Oh, you mean the team?
The defense, yeah.
54.
54. And the question was, can they get 60? I keep on thinking no, but then I keep on remembering that Stephon Tuitt didn't play that much in 2019. And when he was playing, my gosh, he was dynamic. Brian, what do you think? Can this defense, since we're talking about the defensive front, defensive line, can this team get 60 sacks in 2020?
Absolutely. And it's funny, if you look at some other, like the Bears in 86 and the Vikings in like 88 or something like that, it's just incredible to think that they were in the 70s. So this Pittsburgh team could definitely get in the 60s. I think this is the year that TJ Watt breaks Debo's record and eclipses 16 sacks.
Wow. Dave, what was your overall equation when you came up with it?
Oh, yeah, I came up with the equation because I just made it on a whim, not even thinking about it as a prediction on StatGeek, that I'm saying that's my bold prediction for this year. Steelers going to get 60 sacks. I didn't even predict them to have 50 last year, because they never had 3 years in a row with 50. Well, they did that. They need another milestone. So forget just adding 50. And it's going to be their last chance to do it in a 16-game season, assuming we get 16 games this year. And that is because if they move on to the 17-game season the next year, it makes it a little bit easier. I think they can get it this year because, yes, you lost Javon Hargrave, but you're getting back Stephon Tuitt, who is actually more of a sack the quarterback guy than Hargrave. You lost Chickalo. He only had half a sack last year. Hopefully whoever gets his snaps, I'll take his snacks. Whoever gets his snaps can get
You've already taken his snacks.
I've already taken all his snacks. And then of course, Mark Barron had 3, but I think just between increased playing time Vince Williams led the team in sacks one season, but he wasn't on the field nearly as much last year. He could definitely see more, or whoever fills that Mark Barron role. Take all of that and add on the fact, the Steelers have 8 new teams are playing this year, and 8 teams from last year they're not playing this year. And the teams that they are playing this year, when you add them all up, was sacked 13 more times than the 8 teams that they're losing from last year. So they're hopefully playing teams that might be more susceptible to sacks. So that's all the numbers behind it that I did, that I said, I think they can get there.
There you go. All right. I like that. I think we all last year say that we don't think they can get 50 again. I don't think there was anyone amongst us that said that.
I think Brian did.
Brian did.
I think Brian did. I said 49.5 because I just said it was going to be tough.
One of these days, I'm going to stop doubting Keith Butler's ability to scheme pressure on quarterbacks. He's good at it. He's really good at it. He just was awful in the secondary. And that's why someone said when they bring in a couple secondary coaches and they're doing their job in the back end and he can just focus on the front, man, the defense starts to look a little different. And I do want to take a quick sidebar here before we get to our trivia segment. And I don't want to be a jerk. I really don't. But already, or way earlier in the show, there's a couple people that made comments in the live chat about if there's a season next year. Look, folks, everyone on this show, everyone on our platform, whether that's Tony Defeo and Bryan Davis, whether it's Dave and Big Bro Rich, whether it's myself and Lance Williams, whether it's the trio of us here, we all understand the current crisis in our country and around the globe. How boring would it be if every time we talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers, we said, well, if there's a season, well, if there's this, come on, like seriously, we understand it. Everyone understands it. We can't leave our flipping houses unless we want to go to the grocery store or somewhere else like that. We are going to talk as if there's going to be a 2020 season until the 2020 season is officially delayed or canceled, period.
Yes.
Like, that's it. Like,
so, you know what? we're still going to talk.
Of course,
We'll
yeah, of course we
talk,
will.
but we're
Of
gonna
course we will.
now. Jeff
and
is
this
exactly right.
No, and this is not me being insensitive to those that are dealing with COVID-19 in some way, shape, or form, or if you're as someone that is working in a hospital in some way. I'm not saying anything about that. This is all about us talking about the Steelers. And we're going to talk about the upcoming draft. Why? Because the upcoming draft is going to happen. It's going to be virtual. We're going to be virtual, and it's going to happen. So for me, I don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen. I hope there's a season because I love football and I love the Steelers and it's great for our content. So yes, but at the same time, for me, it's like, I don't want to hear if there's a season. We're going to talk as if there's going to be a season until we find out there isn't going to be a season or it gets delayed. That's all I'm going to say.
You know what? If I can jump in.
Oh,
Go ahead,
you
Dave.
go ahead first, Brian.
No.
Brian, you go first.
Well, a couple things. The first thing is, look, I am so desperate for football. I'm watching a video game simulation.
Is it over
which
yet?
The Steelers lost
I heard
21-17. They were driving at the end of the game, but they just didn't have enough time. So I'm so desperate that I'm watching that. Look at this. We have 90 people in the live chat right now at this exact moment. We have so many people talking, and we're here for the love of a football team that doesn't have a number 1 draft pick 2 weeks from tonight.
Mhm.
And we're talking about what they're going to do at 49. Now, I've taken a lot of flack, and I continue to take this flack every year when I write the series of articles for free agency. Why are you writing these articles? It's pointless. We don't have any money. We can't afford that guy. It's highlighting guys. And we always joke, and then I keep on talking about the Stefan Wisniewski signing when everybody's like, we're not going to sign anybody. And why talk about him with what money? And then you turn around, and then all of a sudden something happens. We're here because we love the Steelers. You're here because you obviously love the Steelers because you could be doing so many other things. So with that being said, we actually have responsibilities as far as whatever you want to call us, entertainers, informers, correspondents, whatever, because I'm an amateur guy. This is not my profession. What I'm saying, we have a responsibility to give you content, and we're going to talk about the season, and we're going to talk about free agents, and we're going to talk about the draft.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say
Go ahead,
about
Dave.
stuff is I've been trying to avoid social media other than the Steelers recently, just because you know what? You don't need constant negativity in your life. And it's just so ridiculous. Anytime you put something out there, like if I don't specifically say in an article, assuming the Steelers have a season, the first comment is, why are you assuming that the Steelers are having a season? You know, I do an article about the Steelers need to get to 60 sacks, and the first comment is, well, how about talking about them winning the North? That's a whole different article. I mean, come on. And
you're going to get that too.
The negativity of all these other things. I'm like, why are you? Of course they need to win the North. It's okay to talk about them getting 60 sacks and not mention about them winning the AFC North. You don't have to say every little thing every little time, or else you're going to be repeating yourself constantly. And I still feel like I'm repeating myself constantly because anytime I don't address the situation where I just assume there's a season, people want to come in and roast you for it. And I'm like, I'm kind of done with it. What I've said before with many different things is I am optimistic. I'm hopefully optimistic about things going forward. I'm still hoping to go on vacation this summer and things like that. And you know what? But I understand that things might not work out that way, and I'll deal with it at the point it has to be dealt with.
Well, and to be honest with you, in terms of the National Football League, the NFL came out and said that as of right now, the first exhibition game, the Steelers and Cowboys, is on as scheduled. They just came out recently and said that's the way it is. So that's what we're going to do, people. That's what we're going to do. Just want to make that. I didn't want to get on a sidebar. I didn't want to go off on a tangent. But my gosh, I'm a positive guy, and I'm not going to sit there and think about, all that. Okay, trivia time. Let me put on my imaginary dunce cap as the idiot of the group. And Dave, what do you have for us tonight?
Okay, well, we mentioned these two things. I'm kind of sticking with the theme that I used last week, but we've talked about both of these things. We were talking about defensive line. We were talking about sacks. So why not talk about defensive linemen and getting sacks in Steeler history? As we all know, because I think we already mentioned it, Cam Hayward has led the Steelers in sacks in the past? Do you know how many times he's led the Steelers in sacks as an individual for the season?
Once. Brian.
Is Brian just? I'm.
Seattle has 2 losses.
I'm going to
Seattle
say
has to.
twice.
Okay. Well, you can add them up. It was 3, but I will tell you, out of those 3, one of the times he was tied, but he still led the team. He was tied with Jason Worlds in 2014 with 7.5, and he had 7 in 2015, which led the team, and 12 in 2017, which was because he had more than TJ did in his rookie year. So the question is, other than Cam, who was the last defensive lineman for the Steelers to lead the team in sacks?
Good, Brian. You know it.
No, I don't know it, but it's a crazy guess. And I'm going to go back to 95 or 90. Let's go 94, 95. Say 95 and say Ray Seals.
Jefferson?
Led the team in sacks. Even on those 95 teams, Seals had that many sacks with Green and Lloyd.
I can tell you this. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure, I'm fairly confident in looking at the list that Seals never led the Steelers in sacks.
Do we have to go back?
That definitely still wouldn't be the most recent.
Do we have to go back to like LC?
Well, that's pre-1982. They didn't keep individual stats.
That's right. I have no idea. Who is it?
It would be in 2004. Any idea who would have been in 2004?
Stop hammer time. Hold on a second. 2004.
With 8 sacks.
Stop hammer time.
Would it be Casey?
No, that would be one Aaron Smith.
I was thinking Aaron Smith. I was like, I don't think he ever led the team in sacks, though.
Yep, he led the team in sacks in 2004 with 8.
Mark Tobin gets the award for comedic performance of the night, voting Cam Thomas.
That's awesome.
Played defensive line like he was wearing skates.
That's a good one. And actually, the year before that, a different Steeler defensive lineman led the team in sacks in 2003.
It wasn't Kiesel because that was way too early.
Yeah. That was Chemo, but Chemo wouldn't have led the
You
team
were
in
right.
sacks.
Chemo, yeah.
That was Chemo von Olhoffen.
Wow.
One of the most underrated Steelers of all time.
Yeah. So I do have one last question, which goes along with defensive linemen and sacks. I said that Cam Hayward led the Steelers in 2017 with 12 sacks. That was only the 3rd time in Steeler history since 1982 when they started doing individual sacks where a defensive lineman hit double digits. The other defensive lineman that hit double digits did it twice. Any idea who that player was? I'll tell you, it was before Aaron Smith and Kimo von Olhoffen.
Gerald Williams.
That is a great guess.
I got him. I got him. Go ahead, Jeff.
Gerald Williams did lead one season.
No, I do have him, though. Keith Willis.
Keith Willis would be correct. He had 12 in 1986 and 14 in 1983.
Nobody understands how good that guy was, too.
Yeah. I was really young then, but I remember him as some of my first Steeler games watching.
Okay. Mr. Brian Anthony Davis, you ready?
Yes, sir, I am. So, of course, when we talk about Steeler defensive lines, everybody's going to talk about the Steel Curtain defensive line of the 70s, which, of course, was LC at left defensive end, Joe Green, Ernie Holmes, Mr. Arrowhead at the right defensive tackle, and one Dwight Mad Dog White. Now, fast forward to their Super Bowl in 1980, the 1979 season. In January of that year, they played the Los Angeles Rams. Who represented the Steel Curtain in that defensive line? Who were the 4 defensive linemen?
Was Banaszak one of them?
That is correct. He was the right defensive end.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Banaszak could be
Mean Joe.
Yes.
Joe Green was still there.
LC was still there.
LC stayed there.
It wasn't Dwight White still wasn't there.
He was your right defensive tackle.
Right defensive tackle. See, I was not even 2 years old, but I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, you weren't even born yet, so that's really tough to remember. Oh, who was the other one?
He played a good bit in the 80s. He lasted a long time in the 80s, was kind of a stalwart, a blue-collar guy on that defense. One Gary Dunn from the University of Miami, I believe.
I never would have got that.
Wouldn't have gotten that either.
And one last question. Mr. Banaszak, who we talked about, who has been coaching in college in the Pittsburgh area for a long time, here and there. So my question is this: when he was an undrafted free agent, what's that?
I know this. I know this story. Go ahead.
No, it was not a USFL question.
I know the story he's about to tell.
Go ahead. Finish the question, Jeff.
Are you talking about when he was picked up by the Steelers? What happened?
Yes.
He calls his father. Tells his father because they grew up in Cleveland.
Yes.
Diehard Browns fans. And he tells his dad, "Dad, I just got drafted by the Steelers." What does his dad do? Hangs up the phone.
He didn't get drafted.
Well, he was undrafted, but the Steelers, he chose to go to Pittsburgh. And
yes, he chose.
His dad didn't talk to him for a couple of days, he said. And then he turned into the biggest Steeler fan ever. But it took him a while.
Huge. Yeah, so I love that story.
Now, what's interesting?
Justin Lane is kind of on that same plane. The fact that his family were diehard Browns fans, and he gets drafted by Pittsburgh out of Michigan State. So there you go.
Yeah. What was interesting is I do have a signed picture from John Banaszak, and that was because my nephew, that is my sister's son, that is my brother-in-law who I share my season tickets with. They live in Virginia, but actually his brother painted their house, and he saw that they were Steeler fans. It says, "Well, my brother played for the Steelers." He actually had him come to their house and meet them when he came down to visit. Because they were Steeler fans in Virginia. Now, since then, his brother's passed away, unfortunately. So, but because that my nephew has pictures with him when he was little and wearing a Super Bowl ring and all kinds of great stuff. Said it's super great.
Let me say this: Brian has my copy, I believe, currently. In this quarantine time, if you find yourself, you're like, I've got so much time, I could read some books. I don't want to stare at a screen the whole day. There's a book by Gary Prominence called Their Life's Work. It is the best book on the Steelers of the 70s you'll ever read. And I've read several. I got a copy of Tunch Ilkin's book ahead of time and got to read that. Not that great. I've read Mean Joe's book. They all don't come anywhere close to. Check that book out. Their Life's Work. It is phenomenal. It's a good read.
I gotta go, guys. I'll see you later.
Because Brian has my copy. I believe
I told you.
What? You gave it to someone else?
No, it's gone though. I threw it out.
Oh my gosh.
It was a flood casualty, and I told you.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I do need to replace that, and I will.
No. I don't want to back.
I want to read it.
Buy it. I'm a big proponent of passing books on. So when you get it, I don't want it back. Give it to someone else that is a Steeler fan. So if maybe Dave hasn't read it, give it to Dave. Let Dave read it. He'll love it. And then he can give it to Big Bro Rich and then spread the love. That's my theory. All right. Now here's a little glimpse into the mind of Jeff Hartman and how it works. So I am not, for this show, uber prepared. We talk in our little production meeting, but I normally am figuring out, just like Brian, my trivia question as we're on the air. So my phone's off to the left. I'm doing a little one-handed Google searching here. And now we were talking about the defensive front. I looked up Chris Wormley's stats. I have nothing that I'm looking for in particular. I'm just looking. And what do I notice? That Chris Wormley in his career has 7 pass defenses. Also, nugget from Jeff's brain, I get so excited for defensive linemen to get their hands on the football, even in a pass defense. Tip the ball, knock it down. I love it. I absolutely go nuts when that happens. I celebrate it almost as much as a sack. Not quite, but close. And so I was like, well, wow, he has 7. He hasn't been in the league that long. I wonder how many the other defensive linemen have. So I looked up Cam Hayward. Well, of course, he's been there for a while. He has 30. I looked up
he's got a lot.
Yeah, I looked up Stephon Tuitt. He has 10. But I noticed that Stephon Tuitt has an interception. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And I remember that interception. That was the interception against Cincinnati when Andy Dalton broke his thumb, if you recall. That was on the other goal line. And he was gone for like the rest of the year. Then I was like, what about Tyson Alualu? Well, he only has 9. Well, Chris Wormley, that's pretty good. So then I'm looking at these stats, and I'm seeing 7 pass defenses, 1 interception. Those are the statistics for what player that's been talked about a lot on our platform this week.
That would be is that Dan McCullers?
No.
I was gonna say
No, not Dan McCullers. Not on this show, on our platform. So Lance and I talked to him. We did a whole show about him the other day.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Number 34.
That's right. Mr. Terrell
Darius.
Edmonds. Terrell Edmonds
Daryl
has the same amount of pass defenses in his career as Chris Wormley and is tied with Stephon Tuitt in interceptions. That's it.
Check, please. Yeah, that's. I mean, by the way, I watched that show. It was a. In fact, I watched both of yours and Lance's shows this week. Fantastic stuff.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate that.
Dave, yours were good too. If I would have watched them.
Oh goodness. So that's all we have. That's all I have for trivia. But I do want to make sure everyone understands that for this show, we have the after party. So if you're on live on YouTube, literally just stick around for a few minutes and you'll see the notification come through. And we'll be back on for the after party, which we're going to talk about. We're going to start off the discussion on our all-decade Steelers offense. That's what we're going to start our conversation with. And then from there, I have no guarantees. Brian has. Did you have your bracket?
I do have the bracket.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
it's ready to go. But I do have something I do want to mention.
Sure.
As a teaser for Monday. So as I mentioned earlier in the show, we're 2 weeks away from the draft, and we typically do our mock drafts on the Monday show. So Tony and I on the Q&A will be doing a mock draft. We actually have a special guest from our audience here that's going to be on the show. Haven't really talked to Dave to see whether he's going to be on the show, if he's going to continue the mock draft this year or if he's going to bail out on me. I'm just kidding. And we also have a Nick Bellino coming back for it too. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our draft this week. The next week, you're going to do the draft. You in the live chat. So what we're going to do on this show, we're going to give you an email address to go ahead and let us know if you will be on the show. And we will go ahead and put you in the hat. And we're going to pick 1 to 32. And we're going to announce the draft lineup and just say, I'm going to pick a name out of the hat. Thaddeus Kennedy as the number 1 pick. He's the Cincinnati Bengals. He makes their pick for him. And what he really thinks it's going to be. The next guy up, Steeler for life. He might be number 2. He makes the pick. Does he trade that pick for the Redskins? What does he do? And so we go down. We're going to go 1 to 32. It's going to be your show and your mock draft.
Yeah, if I get the first pick, I'm trading it to the Steelers. For nothing.
That's that's
going to happen.
We're going 1 to 32. You're not in that draft, Dave. Yeah, and no, we can't do that because that's going to throw everything off. But speaking of the Steelers, I'm glad you said that. We're going to all pick at number 49 who we think the Steeler pick is going to be in our draft as well. So with that being said, Dave, no pressure. I know I just put you on the spot, but that's what we do have coming up. So keep in mind, reserve your spot coming up on Monday. I will give you the address, and then I'm going to give the other fellas the address to go ahead and pimp that out all week long.
All right. So that's what to look forward to, but stick with us for the after party here on YouTube. It'll be about 5 minutes and we'll get started. If you're listening on audio platform, first, I apologize about last night's The Standard is the Standard. YouTube was having some major issues. I wasn't able to get it onto audio until about 11:15 a.m. I was ready to throw someone off a balcony like Antonio Brown's furniture, but I didn't. I kept my cool. We eventually got it up there. And then audio tomorrow will be 1 p.m. is when the after party goes on. So stick with us, folks. Hang in there. Enjoy it. Have a great night.